The Undercity, the forsaken capital, lay ravaged by Blight, an uninhabitable wasteland. Thought lost, except for some, who would not so easily let their home go. An unlikely hero emerged, set on removing the Blight and restoring the Undercity to the proud necropolis that it had once been. The Forsaken's return to Lordaeron. With the wounds of the Shadowlands mending, and Azeroth finding a fragile peace, the Forsaken turned their gaze homeward. For years, the once great kingdom of Lordaeron had remained a blighted wasteland, its ruins choked by lingering poisons and its halls haunted by the echoes of war. The battle for Lordaeron had left the land scarred, its cities rendered uninhabitable by alchemical warfare and divine retribution alike. The Forsaken, scattered and leaderless in the aftermath of Sylvanas Windrunner's betrayal, had struggled to find a place in a world that had always feared them. But the time for exile had passed. Driven by a renewed sense of purpose, the Forsaken resolved to reclaim what was theirs, not as monsters lurking in the shadows, but as a people seeking a future. Under the leadership of Kalia Menenthil and the Desolate Council, they returned to the ruins of Lordaeron, determined to cleanse the toxins that still festered in the earth and restore the capital that had once been their stronghold. It would not be an easy task. Years of decay had taken their toll, and the land itself resisted their efforts, steeped in the remnants of the plague that had both birthed and nearly destroyed them. Yet the Forsaken knew hardship better than most. They had risen from the grave once before, and now they would rise again, not as conquerors, but as survivors. A kingdom in ruin. The ruins of Lordaeron stood as a haunting reminder of war and destruction. Once a proud capital, its towering spires had crumbled beneath the weight of its conflict. Its grand halls reduced to rubble and decay. The thick, lingering blight that Sylvanas Windrunner had unleashed during her retreat had seeped deep into the city's foundations, turning what was once the heart of human civilization into a toxic wasteland. The blight cloud clung to every shattered stone and broken banner, a festering wound that refused to heal. Even nature recoiled. Trees withered, their twisted branches blackened by alchemical poison, and the very air carried a sickly greenish haze that burned the lungs of the living. Beneath this noxious ruin, mindless undead shambled through the streets, the pitiful remnants of those who had perished in the battle. Once proud soldiers and innocent citizens, they had been left to rot, their corpses reanimated by the very plague meant to annihilate the Alliance. Now they were little more than husks, twisted, aimless, and devoid of will. The echoes of battle still lingered, faint whispers carried on the wind, the memories of the doomed screaming for release. For the Forsaken, Lordaeron was more than just a stronghold or strategic foothold in the world. It was their legacy. It was the last remnant of their past lives, the final tether to the kingdom they had once sworn to defend. Though death had claimed them, it had not stolen their will. This ruined capital stood as a monument to their suffering, their resilience, and their defiance against fate. But reclaiming it would not be easy. The Blight had poisoned not just the land, but the very perception of Lordaeron itself. To the world, it was a cursed place, a forsaken tomb, unfit for the living or the dead. The Forsaken would have to fight for every inch of it, against the lingering horrors of the past, against those who still saw them as abominations, and perhaps against the darkness that had once made them what they were. Yet, for all the hardship that lay ahead, they would not turn away. Lordaeron was theirs, and they would see it restored, no matter the cost. Kalia Menenthil's Initiative. Kalia Menenthil, the last surviving heir to the throne of Lordaeron, and a newly found ally to the Forsaken, took the lead in the reclamation effort. Though she never ruled over the Forsaken before, her connection to the Menenthil bloodline and a recent embrace of undeath positioned her as a potential unifying figure. She knew that if the Forsaken were to return home, they would need more than just determination. They would need a way to cleanse the land itself. Kalia turned to the Horde for aid, enlisting the help of adventurers to assist in a delicate operation. Meanwhile, the Alliance, ever wary of the Forsaken's movements, sought to uncover their plans. Jen Greymane, still distrustful of the undead who had long been his enemies, dispatched spies disguised as horde adventurers to infiltrate the Forsaken ranks and to gather intelligence. Cleansing the Blight. The greatest obstacle to reclaiming Lordaeron was the Blight itself. The poison was no ordinary plague. It was a creation of Forsaken ingenuity, designed to kill both the living and the dead, while ensuring that nothing could reclaim the land afterward. Conventional means of cleansing it had failed time and time again, but Kalia, recognizing the need for a greater power, sought an unconventional solution. The Forsaken turned to Maldraxxus, the afterlife of war and necromantic mastery, where the plague devisers of the House of Plagues had long wielded the power to consume and neutralize toxins. Through careful study and negotiations, a Plague Eater was empowered by Maldraxxan magic and transported to Azeroth. This entity, an abomination created to consume and purge even the most virulent plagues, would be key to purging Lordaeron of its corruption. Before they could unleash it, however, the Forsaken needed to secure a foothold. They launched an assault on Brill, the ruined settlement outside Lordaeron's gates, reclaiming it from the undead and twisted horrors that had taken root there. Once Brill was secure, the Plague Eater was transported into the heart of the ruins of Lordaeron. As the Forsaken forces advanced, the Plague Eater was unleashed upon the Blight. The creature devoured the toxic fog, purging the lands as it moved. However, the concentrated essence of the Blight proved too powerful for even a Plague Eater to consume fully. As it fed, the magic within the poison reacted violently, twisting the Plague Eater into a monstrous blighted amalgam, a horrifying fusion of necrotic energy, corrupted flesh, and raw toxicity. The battle against the amalgam. The Forsaken and their allies found themselves locked in a desperate battle against the mutated abomination, a horrific amalgamation of pestilence and unholy magic. The creature, a writhing mass of decayed flesh, exposed bone, and malevolent energy, shrieked with an otherworldly wail that reverberated through the desolate ruins of Lordaeron. Its form pulsed with the remnants of the blight it had absorbed, an unnatural force that sought solely to corrupt and consume. With every lurching movement, the amalgam lashed out, sending forth tendrils of putrid filth that writhed like living things. Each strike splattered the battlefield with virulent toxins, warping the ground into a festering wasteland. Forsaken death guards, their armor stained with scars of countless battles, formed a defensive line, raising their rusted blades and shields against the abomination's relentless assault. Necromancers, shrouded in dark robes, chanted incantations of shadow and decay, summoning spectral hands that clawed at the beast's rotten hide. Arrows tipped with blackened steel and bolts of fell-tinged sorcery streaked through the air, finding their marks in the monster's undulating flesh. Despite their efforts, the amalgam fought with terrifying ferocity, its form refusing to succumb to conventional wounds. Each time a warrior struck deep, the creature pulsed and expelled a fresh wave of pestilence that burned through armor and flesh alike. The stench of rot and decay thickened the air, choking the lungs of the living and undead. But the Forsaken had endured worse. With grim determination, they pressed the attack, driving the beast back, slowly but steadily. It was the Death Guards who first found the weakness, the core of the twisted sinew and necrotic energy that bound the monstrosity together. A signal was given, and all forces converged. Necromantic magics flared, siphoning what unholy power remained with the abomination, while sharpened steel cleaved through its bloated mass. With a final, shuddering wail, the amalgam collapsed, its body liquefying into a pool of inert poison. The corruption that had tainted the land for so long withered in its wake, the last remnants of the blight dissipating into the air like a long-forgotten nightmare. The unnatural haze that had smothered Lordaeron for years began to lift, revealing, at last, the ruined kingdom beneath the sky no longer choked with death. For the first time since Sylvanas' reign, the land stood free of her deadly legacy. The Forsaken, weary and battle-worn, gazed upon the remnants of their homeland, uncertain of what the future might hold. But in that moment, they had won. Not just a battle, but a chance at something more. A new beginning, unshackled from the past. The formation of the Desolate Council. With the land cleansed, the Forsaken gathered in the courtyard of the ruins of Lordaeron to determine their future. Without Sylvanas to lead them, the undead had been left in political disarray, fractured between those who still clung to her ideals and those who sought a different path. Kalia Menenthal, alongside several prominent Forsaken figures, presided over the formation of the Desolate Council, a new ruling body meant to guide the Forsaken in the absence of a singular war chief. The council would ensure that the Forsaken would never again be beholden to the whims of one leader alone. Among the council members were those who represented the various factions of the Forsaken society, former nobles of Lordaeron, apothecaries, death guards, and those who had once served Sylvanas but sought a new future. The Forsaken had endured betrayal, exile, and war, but now they stood united, ready to reclaim their home. With the Desolate Council established and the ruins of Lordaeron once again in Forsaken hands, the undead had finally returned home. Lordaeron would rise again, not as a kingdom of the living, but as a bastion for those who refused to be forgotten. However, the Scarlet Crusade's final gambit. As the Forsaken solidified their rule over the ruins of Lordaeron, a long-forgotten enemy stirred once more in the shadows, the Scarlet Crusade. A zealous order devoted to the extermination of all undead had long been thought to be a fractured remnant of its former strength. Years of defeats at the hands of both the Forsaken and the Horde had left the once mighty order scattered, leaderless, and clinging to their dying ideology. However, despite their losses, they were never truly gone. Under the command of Scarlet Commander Foresight, a hardened veteran of the Crusade, the fanatics regrouped in secret, biding their time as they gathered new recruits, bolstering their ranks with survivors from previous battles, and honed their deadly crusade anew. They sought to reclaim Lordaeron for the living, seeing the Forsaken as a blasphemy that had tainted their homeland. With their forces replenished and a renewed fire in their hearts, the Scarlet Crusade launched a bold and desperate gambit to strike at the heart of the Forsaken territory. The fall of Fenris Isle. Their first target was Fenris Isle, a strategic location northeast of the ruins of Lordaeron. Long contested between the Forsaken and their enemies, Fenris Isle had once been occupied by Worgen loyal to Goneus, before the Forsaken had driven them out. Now it served as a key outpost for the undead, securing their dominion over the region. The Scarlet Crusade, striking with the precision and ferocity that had once made them feared, overwhelmed the Forsaken forces stationed there. Scarlet warriors, clad in their signature crimson armor, stormed the Isle, purging its defenders with fire and steel. Priests of the Crusade unleashed holy magic to burn away the undead, while their shock troops cut down any Forsaken who stood in their way. Within mere hours, Fenris Isle had fallen into Scarlet hands. From their newly acquired stronghold, Forsyth prepared for the next stage of his plan, a direct assault on the ruins of Lordaeron. The Scarlet Assault on Lordaeron. Emboldened by their success, Forsyth led his forces southward, striking at the outskirts of Lordaeron. Scarlet Crusaders flooded the ruined city, cutting down any undead they could find. With their war cries of "For the Light! For Lordaeron!" they pressed their assault, believing that they could finally reclaim their homeland. However, they underestimated the resilience of the Forsaken. The Desolate Council, now the ruling body of the Forsaken, swiftly called for a counteroffensive. Unlike the days of Sylvanas, where the Forsaken had fought in isolation, the new leadership had worked tirelessly to unite their people and prepare for any threats to their newfound homeland. The Scarlet Crusade's attacks were met with an immediate and brutal response. The Forsaken counterattack. The Forsaken launched a two-pronged assault. One force pushed the Scarlet Crusaders out of Lordaeron, while the other prepared to retake Fenris Isle. Death Guards and Dark Rangers engaged the fanatics in brutal skirmishes throughout the ruins. while apothecaries unleashed new strains of plague upon the invaders, dissolving their armor and flesh alike. The once scattered Forsaken now fought with unity, driven by the determination to protect the home they had just reclaimed. At Fenris Isle, the battle was even fiercer. The Forsaken fleet, led by their deathly warships, encircled the isle, cutting off Forsyth's forces from escape. As Dark Rangers rained shadow-infused arrows upon the Scarlet Warriors, waves of undead soldiers stormed the island's shores. The battle turned into a gruesome slaughter as the Forsaken overwhelmed their enemies with superior numbers and deadly necromantic magic. Forsyth, realizing that the battle was lost, refused to surrender. He stood defiantly in the burning ruins of Fenris Keep, calling upon the light to smite the undead abominations before him. But the light did not save him. A Forsaken champion empowered by dark magic struck him down, silencing the Scarlet Crusade's last great commander. Victory and celebration in Lordaeron. With Forsyth dead, the Scarlet Crusaders were slaughtered or fled in terror. Fenris Isle was reclaimed, and the Forsaken stood victorious once more. In the aftermath of the battle, the Forsaken returned to the ruins of Lordaeron, where they gathered in the ruined courtyard to celebrate their triumph. Bonfires were lit in defiance of their enemies, and the undead reveled in the knowledge that, despite all who had tried to destroy them, they still endured. The desolate council stood before their people, declaring that Lordaeron belonged to the Forsaken, and the Forsaken alone. The Scarlet Crusade, once the greatest enemy of the undead, had been shattered beyond repair. Though war would always threaten their existence, the Forsaken had proven once more that they were not mere remnants of the past. They were people reborn, and Lordaeron would remain their home for as long as they stood. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Content comes out regularly with lore videos on Sunday and World of Warcraft Protection Paladin content on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays.